So when Jason first asked me to talk at the retreat, I was all jazzed up, like, man, we could talk about lifestyle, finances, vacations, everything that was talked about already. I was excited to talk about. He said, well, he was thinking more like faith. And I was like, oh. It's the only thing in our world and life you can't measure, you can't track it, you don't know how you're doing, there's no feedback, there's no metrics, there's no waypoints and checkpoints. So how are we going to do this, right? And then he said, oh, I want you to go last after lunch on the last day. So, so all of that to say, I came here today to find out what I might say. So I am totally unprepared. Let's just see what happens, right? I have great faith. This is going to be great. So I want to start off, though, with a funny story. My mom now is on Netflix. I got her a Roku video player, hooked it to her TV, and I showed her. I spent 30 minutes with her coaching. Like, here's how you do input. You know, we got to get the concept of inputs. We got to get all these things. And we got her input, pick your show, pick Netflix, pick your show, pick play. She's watching a show and I leave. I'm going. I'm like, everybody's happy, right? And by the way, she calls it Nextflix. So I got busy and didn't talk to her for a day. I called her a couple of days later and said, you know, Mom, how you doing? How you enjoying your TV show? Because I know one of your favorite shows is on there. And she said, I've watched 3 seasons already. And so I'm thinking she doesn't understand what a season is, right? So I think she's watched 3 shows. And I was like, so you've watched 3 shows? And she was like, no, like 3, like I think 19 of them or so. And I said, Mom, what are you doing? She said, it won't stop playing. It just goes to the next one. So you guys see how she was missing a little piece of information? Like there was one button we didn't talk about, like to go back. So I said that to say, what if our lives are like that? Like we're missing one little piece of information, just one little thing, and because of that, our life's running out of control. And we can't get a grip on it. It's like we're catching up, we're always behind, and the thing just won't stop because no one's ever talked about this last little button, right? So anyway, we're going to try to get through this. It is a difficult topic for me because I have the burden of trying to express in words what I know internally. And that's a little different than just explaining charts and graphs and those kind of things. So if you don't mind, the benefit of going last is there's really no time limit, right? So we can just breeze right on into the night, right? So I'm going to just jump in. We have to start somewhere. So I thought this is the first key concept you got to talk about. In order to even get into the topic of faith, you have to start talking about, well, what creates us as humans, right? What creates us? In my opinion, actually I've proven this, we are created in 3 different parts. We have mind, body, and spirit. Has anybody not heard that before? Good. You're already sold on the idea. Peter hasn't heard it. Mind, body, and spirit. Until you truly believe this, nothing else works. In the whole faith, the whole belief, the whole goal setting, nothing really works until you buy this. And I wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about this because, let's see, they told me I had a pointer here. Let's see. Yes, look at that. Cool. So 3 parts to us, and each one of these parts have interactions with the other. For example, you can think scary thoughts in your head and your heart races. That's your mind talking to your body, right? You can stand on the edge of a cliff and you feel panic and anxiety, right? Because of the height. That's your body talking to your mind. All these things communicate with each other. And if you put them all 3 together, you see we have thoughts and feelings. This is what you think, this is what you feel. This is what you know, and your unshakable knowing. So that's what I want to talk about. We're going to start right there. Because the Spirit has, there's like a division here between this side and this side. If you get your mind thinking and your body feeling, in other words, you start thinking something with feeling and emotion behind it, and you repetitively say that, eventually your spirit will buy it. You can convince your spirit into things that aren't true. That's, for example, I am a certain way. I am a certain way. You say it with feeling and emotion. It has to be body and mind. Your body and mind communicate to the spirit often enough. The spirit accepts it, and now it's part of you. And now we got a lot of work to do to undo that. Right? So faith is one of the few states of being. It's a state of being. Faith is one of the few states of being that require all three. You can be excited. You can make goals and plans with your mind. You can work out and exercise with your body. You can even meditate and pray with spirit and believe in your spirit. But for faith to work, it has to be all three. And that's what we're going to be talking about. I told you we're jumping in pretty fast, so already starting to zone out on me back there. So y'all hang in for a minute. Mind, body, and spirit. The concept is your spirit does have a voice. It communicates back to the body, back to the mind through things called hunches or feelings. The only way you hear that is to be perfectly quiet and still. And most of us, how many have spent 10 minutes perfectly quiet and still today? Not many. See, it's not very often we actually hear our spirit talking, but it's always, I believe it's always talking if you listen. The more sensitive you get to listening, the more you can hear this. And then all three parts can work in harmony and you can actually live in faith. So before we leave this slide, one other thing. Just to kind of prove the point home. Sorry. Is it possible to have a great, sharp, intelligent mind in a broken body? Very possible, right? Stephen Hawking was maybe one good example, right? So now, is it possible to have a body that appears to be healthy and functioning, but no mind present? Unconscious, like coma, right? So we can prove that these things both exist and they exist separately, right? Because you can have one without the other. Everybody follow me so far? If I lose you, y'all just jump up and start waving, okay? So then you may ask, well, Joe, how do you prove this one, right? How do you prove the spirit is here? Because I can prove to you your mind and body pretty easily. How do I prove the spirit? And I got the perfect picture for that. The more I researched it and thought about it, y'all ready? I got a picture that will forever remind you of spirit. You ready? There it is. Let me ask you something. Now, there's a lot of smart people in here, and there's a lot of people who are smarter than me. So I always have to ask. If I gave you this sandwich, it's a ham sandwich. If I gave you this and access to the greatest chemistry lab we have in our country, using nothing but chemistry, that's all you get to use is just chemistry. You can make this into a working bicep muscle that responds to nerve and repairs itself automatically. So I don't think anybody, no one yet has raised their hand and said they can do that, right? So let's go back. You don't have the mind to do it. You don't have the physical capabilities to do it. What's doing it? It's happening. The sandwich becomes a muscle, it becomes bone and teeth and hair and nails. It's the divine spirit in you. You see, that's why we all play too small, because there's a spirit in you that knows infinitely more than we are even capable of imagining. That spirit, just the fact that your body can do that without your thoughts or input is proof there's a driving spirit behind it. Because what happens when the spirit leaves the body? The body collapses and falls apart, right? It's like it's just being held together temporarily and it falls apart. So the part that actually makes it is what we call spirit. You guys with me? I feel like I'm preaching a sermon, but I promise you we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're just getting warmed up. But you got to buy into the fact that there's a part of you that is divine, that is bigger than what you see, feel, hear, think. It's bigger than your five senses. And this is just one example. There's thousands of miracles inside the body, but this is just one example of things that are happening within you that you have no idea how they happen, but they are happening. So that's the spirit in you dwelling, making those things happen. So we got to start talking about faith. Now we're getting into, we got the concept of mind, body, spirit. Let's talk about faith. What is faith? So the first thing we're going to talk about, well, let's talk about what it's not first, because sometimes we can define it easier. So the first thing is, it's not logical. In fact, it's highly illogical most of the time. To look at a storm, to be standing in a whirlwind of disaster at your home, to see the circumstances and not believe them. That's very illogical. In fact, most college professors would tell you not to even think about it because it's not logical. Right? So we're going to not even talk about that too much, because most people agree faith in general has to be illogical, because if you embraced what you see on a logical standpoint, there would be no need for faith. So here's the big one though. This is where most people that I talk to get a little bit confused. You can believe in something and still not have faith. There's a story I want to share with you. It's kind of a scenario. It's kind of an old one, so it's been passed around a while. A lot of people in here may have already heard it. But if you haven't heard it, or if you have, just participate with me and really think about this. Let's imagine that you are at a state park, and in the state park there's a great big canyon that runs through. That's why everybody comes to see. It's a rock canyon. And down at the bottom there's sharp rocks and a little stream at the bottom. It's like a 100-foot drop, but it's spectacular views. That day that you're there at the park, you get there early, and there happens to be the world's greatest tightrope walker who is doing demonstrations that day. He's set up in the park, and every hour, on the hour, he's going to walk across the tightrope and come back as a demonstration, for tickets, obviously. But he's doing it the hard way. He's actually pushing a cart, like a wheel cart, across and back, because, tightrope walkers have the little bouncing poles. He's doing it with just a little cart. So you get to see him at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I mean, you're there. You watch it. The crowd gathers around. He goes across and he comes back, goes across and he comes back. You've seen it now 3 times because you're getting ready to go home. Half day's over. You actually watched him do it 3 times. And now you picked up the brochure he's got there and you're reading it. Turns out he travels all over the country. He does this hundreds of times a year. He's done it for 5 to 10 years. He's the world's greatest. And it talks about how he's done it on great big canyons and little canyons. He's done it all over the world. So you know a lot about him now. So at 4 o'clock, you're getting ready to leave. You're going to watch it one more time. And a new guest to the park comes up and stands beside you. This person asks you, what's going on? And you say, well, this person's going to walk across this gorge on this tightrope. And he says, well, what's it all about? And you go into selling him now. Oh, this guy's great. He's done it 100 times. He's been all over the country. Look at this brochure. Look how great he is. He's done it 3 times today, actually. And this guy, the new person, is kind of a skeptic. He's like, nah, do you really think he can do that? And what do you say? Probably. Yeah, I've seen him do it 3 times. Of course he can do it, right? So you're getting ready and you're going to prove to your new friend, now you're friends, you're going to prove just how great this is. Come over here and stand with me and watch this. This is a really good show. So this time the guy comes out and he says, this happens to be my last performance of the day today, and this is special, so it's already a little different. This time it's special. He said, how many of you guys have seen me do this before? And everybody raised their hand because they've been there all day. He says, so everybody believes I can do this. And everybody agreed. He said, well, that is awesome, because for this particular trip, I need a volunteer to ride in the wheelbarrow. So your new friend looks at you, right? Says, you believe this guy. You believe he can do it. Here's a volunteer. He believes it. Going to church, praying, saying, reading, declaring is saying you believe it. But faith is getting in the wheelbarrow. And it's not you guys, it's us. I mean, I would profess, even if it was Jesus himself pushing that cart across and back, I don't think I would volunteer. That shows you as a race how weak our faith really is. That it's so easy for us to say one thing and believe and trick our minds into that we really believe. See, if you would have took a test or you would have sworn an oath, you would have swore you believed that, right? And you didn't have faith in it. So that's the key difference. So it's not belief. Faith is not belief. It is more than that. It's bigger than that. It involves mind, body, and spirit, right? Belief just involves the mind. With me? With me, Steve? You got you. Okay. Like you're going to ask me a question or so. Here's another one that people get confused with. Faith is not hope. Hoping for a better future. Hope is a belief that your future is going to be better, right? And that sentence declares why it's not faith. Because hope is a belief, right? And we just shown how belief is not faith. You can hope for a better future all day long, but until you have the faith to act on it, we're still not there yet. So all of these are awesome. We should all use logic. We should all use belief. We should all use hope. I'm just telling you that when we get to talk about this key word of faith, we're not there yet. We're still one level lower. Okay, so what is it? So if it's not faith, hope, belief, logic, all that, what is it? I come up with a couple of definitions on my own. There's a lot of them out there, but these are the ones that make sense to me personally because I like to remember them and think about them. The first is, it's a state of being. It's not an emotion. It's not a thought. It's not a feeling. It's a state. It's an emotional state. It's in a state where when you're faced with a challenge or something scary or something that doesn't look right, when you're faced with that, there is a complete lack of stress, worry, or fear. It's internal calm and peace despite outward appearances. Another definition that works really good is a confident expectation in the goodness of God despite how things appear. So between those two, we have a state of being and an expectation. So that's kind of what we're going to start focusing on. So this has all been introduction stuff. You guys ready to get into the hard stuff now? There's no way to go through this without getting a little heavy. So try to do my best to keep you engaged, but you're going to have to get some wheels turning and think about this stuff, okay? And it's hard to think with a full stomach on an afternoon after lunch. But so if you have questions or run into something in your mind that doesn't make sense as we go, just jot it down. Let's talk about it later. So how do you know when you're in faith? I say in faith because it's a state of being. It's whole body, mind, body, spirit. How do you know when you're in it? How would you recognize it? Like if you looked around and said, oh my gosh, I'm here. I didn't realize I was here, but I'm here. Here's how you would know it. The first is there's no fear of any kind in your mind, body, anxiety, nothing. You're not afraid of anything. There's not even a thought of fear. The second, there's no worry about what if it doesn't work out. There's no worry about it. Now this next one is going to be where, I think this is the next one. Let me look ahead, peek ahead. All right, no, we got one more. No stress or anxiety. If you have stress, if you're feeling stress and anxiety over a certain situation, you're still not in this faith mindset. The last one, the next one is the one I really is going to hit home for us as humans, just how weak our faith really is. This one is going to be scary to a lot of people. If you are in a complete state of faith, you have no contingency plans. No backup plans, no plan B. And that's scary, isn't it? Think about that. Even just writing it down, it was hard. I was kind of cringing. I was like, but if you really knew it was going to work, do you really need a backup plan? I mean, the backup plan is in case it doesn't work, which is by default means you don't believe it's going to work, which is a whole circle, right? Now, I'm not telling you, I'm going to put this on video, I'm not telling you to cancel all your backup plans for your finances and your business, right? I'm just saying when you're in the state of being and you're in the state of true faith, a backup plan doesn't even occur to you. because it was never a question of if it was going to happen or not. It was never even a thought. So if you've never even had the thought that it may not happen, there's no you won't even have the backup plan. So follow me so far. This is a little heavy. I'm apologizing best I can. Just stay with me. And this is where I'm going to spend a lot of time in the second half of this talking about seeds of doubt. A seed of doubt is something that Peter would call a blind spot. It's something in the back of your mind or in your spirit or in your heart. There's something bugging you that you really just can't buy the whole picture about it. And we're going to talk a lot about if you have a single seed in there anywhere, it negates the whole thing. So now we're talking about true faith, pure faith, right? Napoleon Hill, I got this quote from him in one of his books. I forget which one it was. I've read them all. But it's amazing how when people set out on a path of discovery and how they want to learn about how humans work and how the world works, they all arrive at the same answer. Faith, Napoleon Hill spent years of his life, I don't know, 15, 20 years, interviewing, talking to people, learning, and he came to this conclusion. Faith is a mental attitude where you clear your mind of all fears and doubts. Now he talks about faith is not something you do, it's something you already have. You just don't exercise it. So if you've never heard his story, he has a whole chapter. In every book he's ever written, I think he has a chapter on something he calls applied faith, where you have faith and you apply it to your life. So that's a good place to start if you're starting this process. There's no way I can give you in an hour and a half what it takes a lifetime to kind of really absorb. So I just want to give you some ideas to go home and really think about. So pure faith, we have no doubt, no stress, no fear, no worry. It's actually very rare. I mean, looking back over my life, I would say there's less than 10 times my entire life I've experienced it. True, pure, unwavering, unworried faith, even despite the appearances of craziness. But I can tell you it's never failed. And when you get into that state of being, when your mind, body, and spirit all connect and agree on one common purpose and direction, instantly the world responds. And if the world isn't responding around you, one of those three things hasn't bought on to the plan yet. Your mind, body, or spirit. One of those three is not in. But when they all three connect, join, agree, and believe, things happen quickly. I've seen just miraculous things happen when you finally achieve this state. You can't have a seed of doubt. We're going to talk a lot about that. And the Bible talks about when Jesus was teaching about faith and belief, he's the person I always go to first to see what he say about it. He and his disciples both, he would normally follow the word believe with a comma. Everybody knows what would come next? Believe, comma, and not doubt. Right? A lot of people say, well, if you just believe, no, the whole sentence is if you just believe and not doubt, then you can do these things. So, James is a good one. The book of James says if you must believe and not doubt, because if you have doubts, you're like a ship on the wind being tossed about. You can be influenced and pushed and directed. See, this is what I see. Now, guys, I'm openly going to talk a little bit about Christianity today. I know this is not a religious meeting, but I can't talk about faith without at least including this. What I see in the Christianity today is weakness. We're not bold. We're not weak. How many times as a Christian have you ever run into what I call a mental bully who immediately challenges your belief and throws you some really hard questions that he knows you can't answer because he's done it a dozen times before to a dozen other Christians? Have you guys ever experienced anything like that? Am I the only one? No, I was a couple. I did get picked on a lot, so it might just been me. Well, I set out for my life, I'm going to have answers to every one of those questions, even the hard ones. The questions that nobody wants to talk about, we just kind of sweep them under like, well, let's not really talk about that topic because we don't have good answers for that. I have answers for every one of them, and now I seek those guys out. I want the interchange now because I have answers. I'm going to share with you most of my common answers I give to those really, really hard questions, and this will give you a lot of boldness and a lot of confidence to go out and express and live this kind of life. But if you have these doubts, you're going to be tossed about like the wind. So, all right, now We're transitioning. We've talked about what faith is, what it takes, how you know when you're in it, all that kind of stuff. The seeds of doubt are the key to the whole thing. And this is where I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about, because only one, if you have only one small doubt, the faith isn't pure. It's kind of like pure water with just one little drop of poison in it. 99% of it's pure, but it's still not pure water. They can be hidden. Most of them are. Most of the people I talk to, when we really start talking, they really don't realize they have these kind of doubts in the back of their head. There can be nagging questions that you have about the world and about the things you see happening and the things that don't make sense. And they don't match up with what you've always been told about God. And because of that, you don't have the unwavering faith. So that we're going to get into all those hard topics. Here's some common seeds of doubt. You look around you and you see sickness. You see kids in the hospital. You see cancer. You see Steve Cook's granddaughter. You see things, people dying. Doesn't make sense. You see people dying early. You see people dying for no reason. You see shootings and mass shootings. Crime. You sit down and you pray. Nothing happens. You don't hear anything. You don't know anybody who's had their prayers answered. And then when you actually do have a connection with God for a minute, you feel too guilty to even talk about it and ask, and you don't feel worthy of those kind of blessings. So all those kind of things are what we're going to get into. And I think we missed a slide somewhere. Yes. It skipped it. There was a blank slide there, and I skipped it because I thought it was a mistake, but actually that was my slide. So I need to go back for a minute before we move on. I had a slide in here that had a picture of a football stadium. I have no idea what happened to it. It's gone. It's in the computer cloud. So when it rains next time, my picture may come out of there. You never know. Right? So I put a picture of a football stadium up because there's another story that's really going to help you really understand the whole living in faith concept. We can't go on until we talk about this. That's why I had to go back. See, I spent 6 years on a submarine. And it was an attack submarine, which means we had no schedule and we had everything we did was secret. We couldn't tell anybody where we were going, right? So I don't know if you know this or not, but at least back, in the old days, in my days, submarines, I'm sure they still are, but once you left port and you dove under the water, you're complete isolation. There's absolutely no communication with the outside world. That means no news, no updates, no letters, no mail, no messages, no incoming or outgoing communication of any kind until you reach the next port. And for us, sometimes that would be 4 or 5 months, easily, before we had our first communication. And if the Navy knew where you were going to be ahead of time, they would go ahead and ship all your mail there at that port and be waiting for you. So we'd get these giant bags of mail, and then you'd get 5 months worth of letters and packages all at once. So the first thing you have to do is go put them in order, right? Because you don't want to read the last one first and it doesn't make sense. So you stack them in order and then you start going through them. But see, we would leave normally in October, somewhere around there, September, October, and we wouldn't come back till May or June normally. So we were gone that whole time. But we missed every year, we missed the whole football season. And every time we get the mail, there would be videotapes in there. And for the new people in the room, the young people, a tape is like, it's a way you could send a recording to somebody before the internet. You actually had to, it was like the 1982 YouTube, they had rewind, the whole thing. So there would be a tape in the packages every time of a football game. Most of the time it was like the NCAA championship, the Super Bowls, all that kind of stuff that happened while we were gone. But we hadn't talked to anybody outside the world at all, so none of us knew the outcome of these games, right? So we actually had the recording, and none of us knew the outcome, so we could actually experience it. Yeah. See what I'm talking about? But what happens when there's that one guy who calls his wife, and a lot of times that was me because I really wasn't interested in the game. I was just wanting to see how it was going to end up, who won, So undoubtedly somebody would tell somebody, at least one person in the room would know the outcome, right? So for me, I'll just put myself in my shoe. I'm from Alabama, so the most common thing is the University of Alabama, right? So if someone had already told me the ending of the game, I knew it was a spectacular finish at the last minute. Well, a couple of years ago, Auburn caught some kind of funky kick when 1 second left on the clock and they won the game. Right. Yeah, so if I knew in my mind Alabama was going to win by 1 point with 0 seconds left on the clock, right? Somebody had already told me that's how it ended. I'm sitting in the room with all you guys and we're watching the game and all you guys are rooting for the other team. I'm sitting here for Alabama because I'm the only, Southern guy in the room. And it's 2 minutes left. My team's down by 10 points. People are already getting up and leaving. They're like, yeah, we nailed it. We got you. They're just giving it to you. In that scenario, you put yourself in that scenario. If you've already seen the recording of the game, your team wins by 1 point with 0 seconds left on the thing. Would you be influenced at all by all the bombarding slap talk? That is what living in faith feels like. So imagine that someone went into the future, a friend of yours went to the future and recorded your next business transaction on video and sent it to you. And you knew how it ended. You knew it worked out good. Would you need backup plans? Would you have any fear or worry going in to see the client? Would you have any doubt at all? So living in faith is just like watching a recorded football game, that you know how it ends. And that's a whole state of being. It's unshakable. It is no matter what. You guys could all line up in a row and tell me the opposite. I will shake my hand and be nice and smile and nod, and in my head I still believe what I believe, right? And you run into people like that all the time that have the wrong ideas. But if you can relate to watching a recorded football game, you can understand what it takes to live in faith. So keep that in the back of your mind, okay? You guys with me? Because we're going to come back to the football game example a couple of times. Does that help anybody so far? Yeah. We're good? Anybody still awake? Anybody? If the person next to you is asleep, raise your hand. We could have fun with that. By the way, in the submarine, if you happen to fall asleep in a public area, you are fair game. You may wake up anywhere, right? Okay, so the first seed of doubt that I see when I talk to people about the greatness and goodness of God, the never-ending love and support that is available in the spiritual side of our world, one of the first things people throw back to me is sickness. Kids who die with cancer at 4 years old. My dad, passed away in an aneurysm. He just passed away instantly. No, he wasn't even sick. We didn't get to say goodbye or anything. And when your mom looks at you, heartbroken, tears, crying, and he says, "Why did this happen?" You got to have an answer, guys. You cannot brush this under the rug. If you don't have an answer at that moment, that other person's faith is going to forever be weakened. You must have an answer to these moments in life that come around. This is my opinion. I'm putting the pressure on you guys now. You need to have answers. All I'm going to do is share with you some answers that I personally have just developed. You won't hear these from anybody else. I've never even read these in a book before, okay? These are my personal answers to life's very hard questions. So the first is sickness. I want to first talk about, I want you to imagine, God created this system, this earth, that runs, it's an automated real estate system. It's just producing stuff, it's growing and multiplying, right? Do you guys understand and agree that your body that you're living in came from the earth? You guys ever heard that concept before? You guys realize the iron that's in your blood is very likely been in someone else's blood throughout the ages? There's only so much iron, right? Kevin can tell you this. Is there a doctor that can verify? So it is mathematically possible someone in this room has an atom of iron that was in Jesus' body, in their body. So just think about that. Your body comes from the earth. When you die, it goes back to the earth. You guys, it turns to dust, right? So that's the first concept I want to talk about, sickness. Your body is created from the earth. The spirit is a gift given to you from God. It is part of God that comes to dwell on the earth in your body. Yes, you're made in His image. You're just like a drop of water from the ocean, made of the same substance. If you have a drop of ocean water here in the palm of my hand, it is molecularly the same as the ocean. When God said He created you in His image, the spirit comes from God, eternal spirit. It is just like a part of His spirit dwelling here. So if you can agree with me that spirit comes from some place we don't understand completely, and it's a mystery of the universe. Spirit comes from somewhere off planet. Body comes from planet. You guys, can anybody disagree with that idea, concept? I'm selling you on something here in a minute, right? You know, you all feel it coming. So this is kind of our lifestyle, right? We start here, we grow up, graduate, get a degree, get old, get wrinkled, and kind of the common picture, right? We see it millions of times. So at some point over here, this is a debate of humanity will have forever, is exactly when does that spirit come in, right, to the new body? Is it conscious? Is it heartbeat? At some point in the beginning, a spirit is going to come into a new body. You guys with me so far? Now here's what I want you to understand. This body was created from the earth. The earth is inherently flawed. You guys realize even Teslas, who's had the Tesla? Even Teslas coming off the assembly line, as magnificent as they are, occasionally have a flaw in them. So the earth, the creation, bodies creating bodies, it is possible to have 1 in a 10 million flaw in it that creates it where it is not a long-term body. So a baby can be born, the heart isn't developed all the way. That was a failure of the earth, the flaws of the earth creating an imperfect body. The spirit was perfect. It just didn't get to stay very long. You guys with me? So at some point, this picture, this arrow can slide left or right all the way across here, right? We don't get to choose when this comes. When my sister was 25, she passed away with an aneurysm as well, instantly. She had a 5-year-old son. I'm at her funeral. My 5-year-old nephew is crying. We had a big family discussion if he should be there or not. You know, he wanted him to have some kind of understanding. He was a little mature. But he looked at me with the tears in his eyes. He said, "Why did God do this to me?" You got to have an answer for those questions. Because if you don't have an answer, his connection to God is broken. This is my answer. I sat him down and showed him. Kids can understand this. Let's imagine cars coming off the assembly line, right? Cars coming out of an assembly shop. Your body is like that. It's like a car coming out of an assembly line. It's just coming out. And then as the cars come out, a driver gets assigned to each body as it comes out. Some people, when they leave the parking lot, the car breaks down. They didn't get to drive very far. That's the end of their ride. But it wasn't anyone's intention that happened. It's an imperfect body. So when he understood, she said, "Oh, she just got a bad car." I said, "Yes, she just got a bad car, and she had to go, because we only get one." And he's okay. His faith is restored, or not restored, but preserved. So I want to challenge you, when somebody brings you a question and they try to shake your faith, you should have an answer. You should do some soul searching and have an answer for yourself that you can toss back with a ping pong paddle and turn their faith the other direction. So this is just one of many, many, many questions. Is this helping anybody? Anybody helping at all? Because I know a lot of people have had people die young, unexpected. I have been around tragedy that would just rip your heart out. And I had to have these answers, or else I wasn't going to have any faith. If I didn't have these answers, I could not continue blindly believing. I had to understand these things. So you won't find this explanation in a book anywhere. This is a Joe original. So here you go, right? My team calls it a Joeism. In fact, when I went to one of our jobs last time, our guys were wearing the WWJD things. And I said, what is that? He said, that's what would Joe do, right? So, this is my ideas I'm sharing with you. I'm hoping it will help you. I've talked about my sister. My sister went into the hospital, died within a few minutes after arriving, pronounced dead. We were shocked. No one understood it. We had an autopsy done, the whole thing. Here's what I want you to understand. When she checked into the hospital, they check your weight, right? Check your weight. And then when they're at the autopsy table, they also check the weight again. I just want to point out something that's very obvious, but the two weights were the same. So when she went into the hospital, she's alive. On the autopsy table, she's passed away. The body weighed the same thing. So whatever was my sister, whatever was her, is weightless. There is no way to measure it. It just is there and it's not there. So going back to this, when this happens for all of us at one point, when this happens, it's a weightless, the body is just now an empty shell, but it's the same empty shell it was before. That's another proof that the spirit operates independently from the mind and the body. Follow me so far? Man, I feel like I've lost everybody. Okay, all right, okay. There's a whole lot more we could talk about there, but we're going to be here all night, so we got to keep on going. Okay. So whatever was her, whatever was my dad, is totally weightless, and it passes away. We don't get to control when or how it comes and goes. But we are a blessing to be here. It is a blessing that part of the Spirit of God has entrusted me with a part of His Spirit here, now. My mind and body own a small piece of this great, great intelligence and wisdom that knows how to make mussels from ham sandwiches, right? So, okay, so this is the next one I get bopped upside the head with a lot. How do you explain this? They throw it out to me like I'm going to collapse or something. And the reason they do it is because most of us do. I just want to talk for a minute about this. This is, man, I keep saying that over and over. It's just a minute, right? If I chose to do it, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical. Don't call Homeland Security. Hypothetically, if I decided to, this evening, I could go out and get a gun and come back here and shoot you guys. Do you guys agree I could do that? Yeah. Do you believe that is what God wanted me to do? No. I don't either, right? But it happens, right? So in that act, in that moment, since that is not what God wanted me to do, was that God's will for everyone who died in that room? No. So don't let someone tell you that your loved one passed away, but that was God's will, right? It happens. It happened. I almost attacked a Baptist preacher at my dad's funeral because I was telling my mom that. It is possible. The Lord's Prayer. How many people have ever heard or know what they call the Lord's Prayer? There's an answer hiding right there in like the second verse or so. He says you should pray that God's will would be done on earth. Why would he say that if God's will was always done on earth? You ever thought about that? We have wills. We have a will to go and do things that he doesn't want us to do. That's the choice that we have of freedom. So every pain, suffering, distraught, disaster on earth can almost be linked to the imperfections of the earth and the evil of people. Right? You see what's not on the list there. There is no God on the list. These are people doing these things. So let's not lose sight of this. Okay? You with me? You following with me? So when people tell you that it was God's will that this bad thing happened to you, that will crush your faith. How can you trust a God who would do that to you? Right? And I'm talking about, these are hard questions. So, I mean, I'm not talking, you won't hear this from a pulpit anywhere. So you need to understand that when someone does something, it's not necessarily the will of God. You have God's will for your life. Here's what he wants you to go do. You have your will that you can go do by choice. And then there's this other thing over here. The Bible calls it Satan or evil. Guess what? They have a plan for you too, right? He has things he'd like for you to go do. When you align your will with one of those other two, you become very powerful. You either get Hitler or Billy Graham, right? That is the power of aligning your will with the spiritual world. You have unlimited access to unlimited power. You know, the Bible calls Satan the prince of this world. So don't underestimate his will for you on this planet. It is not for you to have a great life, not for you to have long life, right? So I'm going to make sure, I've got a few notes here. I just want to make sure. The fact that I could go and do something that God didn't want me to do should be enough for you to understand that God's will is not always done here. So that's the key part of the whole thing. So the answer to this is, when someone asks you, what about all these corrupt governments and all this stuff, that's all the will of man. In total unbridled control, lustful thinking. And it's surprisingly clear and precise. The answer is spelled out for you. Let me show you the verse. Matthew 15:9. Out of the heart, here, the body, the heart. That's where all evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, stealing, lies, slander, all that comes from here. Our hearts. We all have it. Sometimes, even just to be purely vulnerable with you, sometimes I don't like publicly talking about faith because then I can't be bad anymore, right? I can't wish bad things for people sometimes, you know. But we all have a heart, right? Out of that heart are all these issues. And these issues show themselves in the world on grand scales when the people who are unchecked, unbridled, or unrestrained, when they get in control and power, their influence destroys lives. That is not the will of God. The will of God is that we would have love, honor, cherish each other, love your neighbor. That's the first, most important thing he said, love the other person. But he said love the other person, and this is what we do, right? We all do. So don't let someone tell you there is no God because these things exist. The answer is, these things exist because we don't know God. We don't live in it. So this is the biggest one of the night. This is the one I think will help the most people. So we have two common seeds of doubt. One is sickness that happens unexplained. One is evil and crime that's just rampant all around you. This one, I've talked to dozens of people who said, I spent hours in prayer and I didn't get anything. I didn't hear anything. Has anybody had an unanswered prayer before? Anybody? Just me again? My gosh. Maybe I'm the only one then. So sometimes my prayers are silent. And I had to know why. I had to understand the process. And when I really understood the process, then I had to go out and prove it to myself. I started with my crazy nephew that now doesn't have a mom or dad, right? He's out living on his own crazy. I set out and on mission. I'm gonna influence him remotely. And I'll tell you those stories a little later, but I brought him home from school one day and there's a guy standing in the driveway and I said, you know this guy? He's like, no, is he here to buy drugs? And he's like, I've never seen him before. I said, well, let's find out what's going on. We got out and the guy standing in the driveway said, are you Chris Turney? And he said, yeah. He said, I just want to come by and invite you to our youth group at church. Never met him, don't know him, don't even know how he got his name. Those things can happen for you when you get into this topic. So there's some really, the good news is, it's easy to fix if you understand how the whole thing works. So the first question I want to just throw out to you guys. On earth here today, in general, now there's always exceptions and miracles and stuff, but in general, how are prayers answered for us here? Anybody got an idea how to answer it? How's that? Yeah. Through, well, the first guy got it. He happens to be the smartest guy in the room, so we'll give him. The answer was, prayers are answered through people. And until you get that, your prayers are not going to be effective. Prayers are answered through people. That means you can be an answer to someone's prayer too, right? It can go both ways. Prayers are answered through people. I want you to keep that thought churning just for a second. I'm going to start adding to it. or prayers answered through people. Prayers answered. Keep thinking about that. Because let's imagine, gosh, I can't even begin to think of a good scenario. I wish I'd have thought of one ahead of time. I'm just going to keep it generic. Let's say you have a need in your life that's very specific, and it's something that really affects the quality of you have this need, and you start praying for it. The answer, you guys ever seen the movie 6 Degrees of Separation? Or the concept of there's only 6 levels of separation between us and anybody on the planet? Anybody not heard that? So do I need to explain it? Okay, so let's imagine you started praying for something in your life or in your family's life. Your answer is 6 degrees of separation away and a person who has the answer. You guys follow me so far? When you start to pray, I believe it, I've proved it, I've seen it. When you start to pray, instantly things start happening. I imagine it like a spider web being built. Spider has a crawl over here, go spin one web, then he has a crawl over here and spin another web. So the spirit that you're praying to, connecting with, is creating these spider web connections, trying to pull all this together. The reason sometimes it takes so long is because a lot of people don't listen. You get a hunch you should go to a meeting, but you're tired and you don't go. The spirit is like throwing up their hands. It took me a year and a half to get the right person in that room, and you didn't go. Sometimes I think the spiritual world follows us around like they look like a cheapskate at Disneyland. They're like, every time they turn the corner, they're throwing their hands up again. It's like, And it can happen on the other side where the person who has a potential solution for you doesn't listen to the hunch he should go to the meeting. He's too tired to go. She's too tired to go. They don't go. So now that opportunity is missed. So the spirit world goes back to work again, lining up another scenario. And just this morning, he put somebody in the elevator with you that had the answer, and you didn't talk to them, and the spider web fell off. Now we got to go start building another spider web. There are people in front of you at all times that could potentially be the answer you're looking for that you're not talking to. And vice versa. You have the answer for people who need it. I know the people who can answer your prayers, and I don't go to a meeting because I'm tired. But I really feel like here I should go for some reason. I was at Lifeonaire because I felt like I should be here. I'm still here because I don't know why I'm here, but I feel like I should be here. Right? I'm still looking for this debt-free thing, debt-free investing. But I've learned enough to know if you feel here a hunch, a feeling, a hunch, that's spirit speaking to mind and body. If you don't listen, it will. You miss the answer you're looking for. Here's another key to that I want to talk to you about just for a second. This is what I was trying to remember a while ago. Well, actually, I'll skip ahead. I'm sorry. I'm a little lost here for a second. I'll come back. Remind me to talk about offending the spirit if we don't get to that. I think I'll get to it at the end. Okay. So you're praying. You start praying, please help. Thank you for this help. I know it's coming. I know it's coming. All over the planet, Christians who are linked into this network start feeling the urge to go talk to people for no reason, just sharing this, doing that, going to meeting. And they're trying to weave a zigzag connection between all the people on the planet to get to you, to your answer. Most of the time we quit before. That's why Peter, the key is to never quit until. My wife would ask me, how long are you going to do this for? Until, because the connections are being made, they're being brought into the right place, they're not being picked up or dropped. The handoff is dropped in football, right? It's fumbled. Well, we got to build a new play. We got to start over again. And this is happening all around us. We are not in this room today by accident. The prayers that you've been praying, potentially there's someone here with the answer. But if you've got to do your part, right? You have to go and talk and express and listen and know people, because God can't answer your prayers if you don't know anybody. You guys realize that? Please get a hold of this. This is key to to everything. So you give up too early, you don't see results, you don't do your part, you don't do every opportunity, every lead that comes into you that's a potential, you should follow it. Assume it took multi-thousands of spiritual influences to make that connection, to get that phone number to you. Assume the value of every phone number that comes to you is God went through extraordinary lengths to put this person in front of me for a reason. Assume that. It's not always true, but when it is true, you need to be assuming that going into it. So the reason your prayers aren't answered is either one, you're not doing your part, you're not out talking to people, you're not letting people give to you openly, you're not receiving things when people try to give them to you, you're not open to suggestions, you're not following advice, and you're quitting too early. It's very complicated to get you into the right connections to the right people. This is a lot of spiritual work that goes into answering your prayers. And right before, maybe even at this event, there's 2 or 3 people have come up and introduced themselves and said that they do whatever it is you're looking for, and you were too embarrassed to talk about it. And the whole spider web falls. And then we got to start all over again. But when you quit praying, the spider web falls too. So don't lose sight of this. So that's the first obstacle in most people's prayers. If you'll just get that and fix it, most of your prayers will be answered. I promise. I've seen it. So when you're praying for someone like a teenager, what you should be asking for is the right friends and influences which show up in their life with the right message that they're willing and able to receive it. You don't want them to change. You want people to come around them. Because teenagers are a reflection of their friends, right? So you want the right friends and influences to come into their life. Thank you that this is happening. I can imagine you're putting the connections together, the right friends, the right networks, the right parties, the right social, the right car rides, the right bus rides. All these connections are coming together so that the one true friend can show up in this person's life and change them. That's how prayers get answered in real life, in real world. The next thing, the reason your prayers probably aren't being answered is you're praying for how something should happen instead of what should happen. Think about that. You're praying, you have a vision in your mind of specifically how a scenario should work out, and you're praying for that scenario to happen. What you're supposed to do is focus on what you want at the end. Proverbs 16:9 says it best. It says that you create the vision for your life. That's your job. Comma, God will order your steps. It's a short verse. You create the plan, God orders the steps. 16:9, just like a television, 16:9, that's how I remember it. Proverbs 16:9. Because, huh? I am technically smarter. I used to be a computer guy too. What's that?
Me too.
You too? So, if you're praying earnestly that John Smith in your life would get his act together and come cut your grass, or that your oldest son would come and cut your grass because it desperately needs it, you are praying how, right? Instead, you should step out and say, thank you, God, for help getting my grass cut. You focus on the results. Let God take care of the how. If your prayer includes details, you're still not there. Your prayer needs to include a clear picture of what it's going to be at the end, but you don't need to know, you don't want to know, like, how does it get there? Like that kind of thing. So if you're praying for how and not what, that's another weakness in your prayers. Another common thing, especially when we're dealing with new people coming into Lifeonaire, they're still chasing dollars and money. Say?
Did you want a really good example of that, super quick?
Which one?
Praying for how?
Pray for how and not what. You got an example? Yes.
Yeah, our son needed to be doing his budget because the wife was spending.
Okay, you got to hold on. He's got a microphone. People in the back can't hear you. So. Peter was not ready. Run ready. Hey, never mind. We got it.
I was praying for our son to do the budget because his wife was just spending way too much money. They had plenty, but she was just way overboard. And the ultimate, I just wanted him to do the budget. I didn't pray for how. And God answered the how by putting the pieces together that his car got repossessed. And that's how he found out that she was not handling the money well, that she was overspending, and instead of having money in savings, they were $10,000 in debt. I would have never prayed for that how.
Yeah.
But God,
Yeah.
I only prayed for him to handle the budget, and God took care of it. So that was just,
Yes. So when you focus on, you wouldn't have picked that path, but you got to
No.
pick the direction, right? You got to pick the
right, I
direction.
picked the
Yeah.
end
That's the
goal,
key.
that he would do the budget, and God put all the pieces together.
Yep. And I've been told multiple times, never tried it because I take advice well, is people tell you to never pray for patience,
Yeah.
right? Because it will be exercised, right? And you will get stronger with this. So if you're praying from a consumption standpoint, where you want because your body wants, it's not effective. God is when I say God, I mean the creator that hovers over this earth and controls all life. Everything is alive because there is a living spirit here. Okay, yes, with me. That's what I call God. When you are praying because you want to consume something, there's no love in that. God is love. He doesn't love you. He is love. It is a spirit of love. If he loved you, it's a choice, right? God is love. It is nothing but love. And if you don't communicate in love, you're not speaking his love language, right? You have to talk from a spirit of love in your prayers. If you want a larger business, that's honorable and respectable, but why do you want it? You want to help those people. You want to help more people. That's the love part of your business. So that's the prayer is, put more people in front of me that I can help, influence, change, grow. Help, send me the sellers that really desperately are looking for me and help me. Not, X dollars, give me X dollars or give me more business next year. If it's not based in love, it is not from or with God. That is the simplest way I can say it. It has to be based out of love for another person or love for creation or love in general. You have to have that spirit behind it. So this is the last one. I get a lot of people tell me they prayed for a sick person who didn't get healed, right? Anybody ever had this experience? It's painful. It's very painful. I want to start off by saying first, Lazarus is dead, right? Even the person that Jesus personally brought out of the grave and healed completely died. So eventually everyone we know will die. So let's not say that we can stop death, because it is a part of the fine print of our agreement that we signed at birth. Is kind of like the bank recalling your note. It's like at any moment when God seems fit, spirit will be recalled. Right? So that is your agreement here on this planet, right? And if you don't like that setup, well, go start your own planet, right? So that's our setup. So when you're praying for someone and they pass away, remember the thing about the body was broken and it passed away. I do want to point out one thing, though, that a lot of people miss. If you go back and read the New Testament, Jesus especially made a point to say it every time. I think almost every time, except for children. Children, we're talking about children separately, but almost every time when he's talking to an adult, when he healed someone, he said, "Your faith has healed you." You guys catch that? The faith of the other person is what creates the healing. I can pray for you all day, touch you to heal you. If you don't believe it's going to happen, there is no healing. Jesus made it a point to turn around and stop and said, "I didn't heal you. Your faith healed you, Leon." Please don't miss that, because it's a key part of the whole healing process. The fact that the placebo even works at all on our planet is undeniable, unquestionable proof that it works. That healing comes from faith. And it's faith in the preacher, faith in God, faith in a pill. it is your faith that heals you. So don't lose sight of that. Now, children are a whole nother issue, because God never said to a child that your faith healed you, because they're not old enough to understand what that is, right? That is grace. Grace and mercy, healing. That is from when Steve's granddaughter was sick and people prayed and the baby healed. The baby didn't believe or anything. So at some point, we don't know exactly when, at some point it goes from the responsibility of people around you to your responsibility to believe it. We don't know exactly when that happens, but there is a transition somewhere. Any questions on unanswered prayers? I feel like I'm throwing rocks at you and everybody's dodging. Like, not me, not me. Not me. Well, we're coming into the final. How we doing on time? How we doing on time? We're okay? We got one more section. So I know it's hot in here too. And luckily I put on my good wool jacket right before this.
Well, I was wanting your take on this, on healing for adults.
Yeah.
People pray and, pray for a long time, and the person ends up passing away.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I've heard, and I kind of believe this, that they just weren't healed on this side of it. They got it. They got it.
Yep.
But it's on the other side.
Yes.
And
so there can be spiritual healings that someone's soul is at rest, their spirit's at rest,
right.
They're totally healed from that standpoint, but it's not a visible kind of thing. That's a great point to point out too.
That's,
because your spirit can be broken, right?
yes, most definitely, and they, especially people who struggle with an illness for a long term.
Yes.
And then they finally are out of that whole misery.
Yeah, and some people get broken bodies, and it just has a flaw in it, and it's theirs to ride in. Their car has a flat tire coming off the dealership, right? But I personally believe in the right environment, with the right expression of faith on their part, that body can be healed. It's maybe they have a seed of doubt, right? Maybe they have a seed of doubt. One of these seeds that, well, I'm not really sure I'm worthy, which is what we're going to talk about, right? Guilt a lot of times keeps people sick. You'd be surprised how many times guilt will keep someone sick. I did want to talk about faith. We talked about faith involving mind, body, and spirit, right? It's a state of mind that takes all three to work. I forgot to mention to you that there's a couple of others too. There's not many things in this whole world that takes mind, body, and spirit. But grief and despair is one that affects mind, body, and spirit. And love is too. Love between people, mind, body, and spirit. So there are a few other ones on the list, but the list of being the list of items that affect mind, body, and spirit on earth, there's very small list. There's just a few. But faith isn't the only one. I forgot to point that out earlier, that depression, grief, all those kind of things too. And the last one I wanted to talk about was guilt. Guilt is one that affects mind, body, and spirit. You guys realize that have you ever met someone who had a horrible habit that was hurting a lot of people? If you really sit and talk to them, when they first started doing it, they felt guilty about it. Does this relate to somebody? Like the first time you do it, I wish I hadn't done that, I shouldn't have done that. The second time was, I probably won't do that again. The third time was, what were we talking about, right? If your mind and body do things that offend your spirit will come back to you with something called conviction. You'll feel it. Like a gut, like I should not have done that. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have been that way to that person. I wish I had. If you've ever said those words, I shouldn't have, or I wish I hadn't, that is conviction coming back to you from spirit. That's the feedback, the ping pong. You do something, it offends the spirit comes back, says, I'm offended by that, and it gives you the conviction over it. So if you do this enough, if you do it enough and don't listen to the conviction, I've proven it, I've seen it, I've interviewed people. the Spirit will actually cut itself off and no longer send you back any conviction or guilt, but it also will not longer be offended. And those people become cold, calloused, serial killers, no emotion. That's how they can go do crime and it not affect them anymore, because the Spirit will cut it. The Spirit will not allow itself to continue to be offended. It's eventually just going to not listen to the mind and body anymore and not send you back any conviction. So eventually people will not feel guilty at all. They just keep doing what they're doing. That's how the big executives can make a small integrity adjustment on the accounting records, and then they lose sleep over it for weeks, but then nobody ever questions it or brings it up. So next year it's a little easier. And then now, 5 years later, they're on, American Greed, and they're talking about how they stole all this money, and they didn't feel anything, because they had already been turned off by that. So guilt stops prayer in its tracks. You cannot, if you do not feel worthy of asking for a blessing in your life, it will not happen. And so I'm going to help you with that. If you go into this saying, I would really like for you to bless my home with peace and security, but I've been an asshole and I really don't deserve it. Has that, anybody ever had that? Is it just me again? It's like, oh my God. I'm going to go back and recant all this stuff, right? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go start going into, like, when you go into the doctor. Hey, I know a guy who's got like this thing. And what would you call? I'm going to start saying I know a guy who has these problems, right? So if you have guilt, and guilt, what I'm talking about is, if I hurt your feelings and I apologize to you, that's the end of this guilt conversation as far as we can take it. I'm sorry we did it. I'm talking about when you do something that offends your spirit internally. Now this is stuff you won't find in a book either. This is a total Joe makeup session. When you feel conviction in your spirit, you have done, said, thought, or done something that offended the Spirit, and that Spirit is sending you back a conviction. Feeling, I wish I hadn't have done it. You, when I say you, it's your consciousness, your mind and body, right? That's what we see. You don't have permission to forgive that. If I offended you, and I said, well, I forgive myself for that. Do you still feel any better, right? If you were my spirit and I offended you, and then mentally I said, well, I forgive myself for that, I made a mistake. You're still sitting over here offended, right? You cannot forgive yourself for things that hurt your spirit. Please, this is getting back to we're going to tie the whole thing together. There has to be another way to take the guilt off of you and restore faith that your spirit can trust your mind and body again. Like, it's a relationship. We're going to restore. How do we restore the relationship? Here's the difference. Christ went through the suffering and pain so that you can ask and your spirit can forgive. This gives you the right for your spirit to forgive unconditionally your sins again. When you can do something that convicts you here, the Bible calls that sin. He says we should confess our sins to who? To God. God is connected to the Spirit. Please forgive me goes to God, goes back to your spirit. That's how you go around the wall that they've got up, right? The wall that the Spirit has. Christ is the key. This is why Christians all over the world can pray for something and it happens. No other religion that I know of says, someone comes out and says, please pray for my granddaughter, baby in the hospital, and people pray and it happens. I don't know of any other religion that does it. Every other religion say, go in and say a prayer in the closet, go in and sit by yourself and meditate. They would teach you all these things, but there's no power in it. There's power because when you ask for forgiveness and you receive it, your spirit is now connected, mind, body, and spirit again. You have no conviction. You have no guilt. Now your prayers can be heard by God. God hears the prayers, influences the people around them, and things move in the planet. That Christianity is the only thing on the planet that offers that connection. That's the difference when people throw a bone at you and say, well, how do you know all these other religions are wrong? They're not wrong. They don't offer a connection to the Creator. They don't offer a path for you to for your spirit to forgive you for the things you've done against the Spirit. No other religion has that. So that's why Christianity has a power to it that we can pray as a group and things happen. You guys realize that the Spirit that's in you is from God, is created by God, is eternal, living Spirit. It is connected to the Creator. You have a connection to the Creator. All of us do. Imagine invisible strings going up, right? Or, well, we go back to the spider web thing again. Everybody a little spider web. So when I earnestly pray to God, I have no guilt because I have forgiveness. I can honestly ask and pray. That message goes up like a cell phone signal and comes back down to all of you guys. That's how someone gets a hunch to call you in the middle of the night, because it goes up and back down. When you are connected, you have that power. You can actually ask for things, and millions of people around the world feel it. And if we all listen to those hunches and those guidance and those directions and those thoughts in the middle of the night that wake you up, if we would all listen to those, we would be unlimited power. We'd all have our prayers answered quickly and accurately. But Christ is the difference. So don't let somebody throw you about, well, how do you know Hindu and Buddha and all these things are wrong? They're not wrong. They give you a perfect body and mind. But they don't address the spirit side. They don't address when your body does something to offend your spirit, you don't have the authority to forgive that. That forgiveness has to come through the Spirit back to you. And that's what Christ offers. And that's what I wanted to really get to, this whole thing, is when you have that connection, your prayers are effective. And I've seen it. So there you go. That was the best I could make up on the fly. Here's my email address. Please send me thoughts. Challenge me with hard questions. Punch holes in everything I say. Be a student, not a follower. In life, don't ever let somebody lead you on a religious path without you being the student. You be a student, not a follower. Nobody should be a follower here. We're all too smart for that. So.
Let's give him a huge hand. Wow.